Welcome to this explainer. If you're just getting into forestry, it's really easy to look at a forest as just, well, a wild patch of nature, right? But today, we're going to look at it through a totally different lens, the highly structured lens of a farmer. I want you to imagine managing an entire forest exactly like a farmer manages a crop. Just like a farmer meticulously plans out a field of wheat or soybeans, foresters do the exact same thing with trees. It's this fascinating, continuously moving cycle of planting, growing, and eventually harvesting. But that brings up a pretty massive question, doesn't it? When is a forest crop finally done? Think about our farming analogy for a second. If you plant a corn crop, you know for sure you're going to harvest it in a few months. The timeline is fast, and it's laid out right in front of you. But trees, wow, trees take years, decades, sometimes even lifetimes to fully mature. So how do we actually know when it's time to harvest? How do we measure the end of a cycle that might literally outlive the person who planted the seed? Well, that brings us to section 1. What is forest rotation? Okay, let's dive right into this. The formal term we use for this timeline is rotation. And rotation is defined as the planned number of years between the regeneration of a forest crop and its final harvesting. Now, I really want you to focus on those words, planned number of years. This isn't random. It's not a wild guess. It is entirely calculated right from day one. And notice how it specifically calls it a forest crop. We aren't just sitting back and letting nature take the wheel here. We are engineering a specific, deliberate timeline from the very moment new trees sprout or regenerate to the exact moment they're cut down. Moving on to section 2, the 5 rotation goals. Now, what's really interesting here is that this planned number of years doesn't just come out of thin air. A forester's timeline depends entirely on what they actually want to get out of their crop. To understand this, we need to look at 5 distinct goals, or let's call them forester personas. Depending on who is managing the land, the timeline of the forest is going to shift drastically. We have a sort of menu here of the different objectives a forester can choose from. You've got your type of rotation, the basis, meaning the underlying logic behind the choice, and the ultimate objective. Depending on which of these 5 paths you choose, physical, silvicultural, technical, financial, or sustained yield, the lifespan of your forest is going to look completely different. Let's break these down to really see what drives these major decisions. Let's start by contrasting those first 2 goals. On one hand, you have physical rotation. This is for the person whose only objective is the highest total yield. They want the absolute biggest physical pile of wood possible, so their basis is maximum volume production. They're going to wait exactly as long as it takes to get the sheer maximum amount of wood fiber. But then, contrast that with silvicultural rotation. This forester has a totally different persona. They aren't worried about giant piles of timber. Actually, their basis is the natural maturity of the trees, with the objective of getting the best seed production. They just want to make sure the trees naturally mature, drop their seeds, and reproduce well for the next generation. So it's much more of a biological focus rather than a pure volume focus. Next up, we have technical and financial rotations. And I love this because it brilliantly illustrates just how specialized forestry can get. Think of technical rotation a bit like baking a cake. You don't take a cake out of the oven just because it's big. You take it out when it's exactly the right consistency for your recipe. A technical forester bases their timeline on the exact size needed for a specific product, aiming for precise timber dimensions. Like maybe they need perfectly sized logs to make telephone poles. They're going to harvest the second the tree hits that exact dimension. Financial rotation, on the other hand, well, that ignores specific product size completely in favor of the wallet. The basis here is maximum financial return, and the objective is the highest profit. They're basically timing the market, watching interest rates, and calculating tree growth to pull the trigger exactly when the harvest makes the absolute most money. And finally, we arrive at sustained yield rotation. I want to pause here and really highlight this one, because this is the absolutely crucial academic goal that modern forestry strives for. The objective here is true long-term sustainability. The technical basis for this is harvesting at the point where MAI, or mean annual increment, equals CAI, the current annual increment. Now look, without getting too bogged down in the math, that intersection point where MAI equals CAI is the absolute technical sweet spot. It's the exact moment you can harvest to ensure the forest keeps producing forever, literally without ever running out of resources. It is the ultimate, perfect balance of harvesting what you need today while continuously growing for the future. Let's move to section 3, short versus long rotation outcomes, and see how this builds. So we've talked about the planning, the analogies, and those 5 different forester personas, right? But how does the timeline you choose physically affect the harvested wood you get at the end of the cycle? Let's walk through this direct comparison together. If you played the short game with short rotation, you plan for a shorter number of years and you get more frequent harvests. You get your crop way faster, but the trade-off is smaller diameter timber and lower overall volume per harvest. So what's that good for? Well, it's perfectly suitable for pulpwood, which is the stuff we use to make paper, or for fuelwood. On the flip side, playing the long game with long rotation means much less frequent harvests. You have to wait a lot longer to see your crop finish. But your reward? Much larger diameter timber and a significantly higher volume per harvest. This massive wood is exactly what's suitable for highly valuable saw logs, or those beautiful veneer logs used in fine furniture. So your rotation timeline literally dictates what your forest can build. So we've clearly seen how managing a forest crop isn't just a simple one-size-fits-all endeavor. Which brings us to a final provocative thought for you to ponder today. If your goal was true long-term sustainability, hitting that perfect sweet spot where the forest provides forever, how long would you wait to harvest? Think about how the 5 goals we just learned about and the stark differences between playing the short game for paper and the long game for furniture will ultimately dictate the future survival of our global forests. Every wooden table, every single piece of paper, and every standing managed forest represents a deliberate choice made years, perhaps even decades ago. So the next time you look at a product made of wood, I want you to ask yourself, what was the forester's objective here? And when exactly did they decide this crop's clock had finally run out?